All right, welcome everybody. We should be live. Let us know in the comments if you can see us, hear us. We're a few minutes late. I had a little technical difficulty as usual. Hello, George.
Hey, Tom.
How are...
He wrote down great stream. That's funny. We're not even.
Yeah,
You
great
guys are
show.
killing me.
It only goes down from here. So stay
So
tuned.
you don't, just so you know, you only have me and you up. You don't have your
Oh,
chart up,
thank
just so
you.
you know.
There we
If
go.
you want to change that.
So that should pop up. I just switched it. Thank you, George.
Okay. Now we're good. Let's
Now,
do it, Tom.
now we're good. It's because I didn't want to see the chart, but I guess we have to.
There we go. It looks good.
So we had another Friday afternoon sell-off, and of course, as soon as the equity markets closed in the U.S., now we're having a little bit of a rally back above 60,000. We closed the equity markets closed right here, so we were under 60,000 with Bitcoin when the U.S. equity markets closed for the weekend. So this is every Friday now. This is 4 Fridays in a row. I mean, you can see from this morning, this is the opening candle. So here we go.
Because this thing's so comfortable.
Again and again and again, down 2.76% from, the peak of the opening candle to the closing candle. So, and down 2.4%. If I look at IBIT, which is BlackRock's ETF, that's down 2.4%. So day over day, the ETFs were down 2.4%. So the Bitcoin miners actually did okay today, especially the larger ones. So we can go through that, and I did update the week to date for the Bitcoin miners, so we can take a look, because the Bitcoin miners have been trying to make a comeback the last few months. So I don't think we got derailed off of that this week. We'll look at that chart, and you guys can decide what you think. But for the most part, I think we were okay, especially today. With Bitcoin down a bunch, Marathon was, of the big three, and I know there's, 8 or 10 now that are over $1 billion market cap. But Marathon was green, Riot was green, Cleanspark was down just 0.6%, Bitfarms 0.7%, Cypher 0.9%, TerraWolf was green, Iris Energy out of the big ones was the big loser today, down 4%. And BitDeer was the big winner today. They did have a press release, which we'll go to, up almost 5%. So we were a little bit all over the place today, but in general, the Bitcoin miners outperformed Bitcoin today on Friday. We've had some Fridays where Bitcoin was down and the Bitcoin miners erased their gains for the week. That did not happen so much today. By the way, if you guys could be so kind as to smash the like button. We have 20 likes. We're going for 100 likes. And then we'll see if we can get there and go for 200 likes. But it does help the stream out in real time in a big way. And we are in the summer doldrums, to say the least. And people have checked out of Bitcoin. They've checked out of the Bitcoin miners. And I read a bunch of articles about it this week. And we'll see, the first poll, let's see what people... Oh, George is way ahead of me. Next move for Bitcoin. So you guys can, if you're on a device where you can vote, fill in the blank. Where do you think Bitcoin goes next? Have we bottomed out? We will take a look at the 1 day. I mean, this is a pretty tough call. So let's see. I won't weigh in. George, you want to tell your opinion while they're voting?
Yeah, did you see the super chat?
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Midway1, member for 7 months. Thank you very much. I bought more iron. I always want to say Iris Energy, but iron they want to be called now. I bought more iron shares in 1150s. With iron reaching 40 exahash in the next 12 months, it doesn't deserve to have only half the market cap of CleanSpark. Yeah, iron's had a big pullback. I didn't buy any, but I'm starting to look at some stuff. I'm starting to look at some, September, October options. I've bought a few. And for me personally, I like that move midway. So, not financial advice, of course. Nothing we say is financial advice, as always. But I like that move. And, yeah, because that's a pretty decent pullback. I'll just quickly go to we'll pull up the Iris Energy chart, and it's had a healthy pullback. I mean, this is just in a short period of time. This, it actually topped out on June 13th, but from a daily candle close on June 17th, so, that was only 11 days ago. And this got to $14.95, so didn't quite touch $15. So at $11.50, I mean, from the peak here, if I go down to $11.50, that was over a 16% pullback to the close today. It's, a 25%. Is that right? That's a 25% pullback. So, and I don't think I went to the right. Yeah, to $11.50, which is where Midway One bought it. It's more like almost a 23% pullback. So, that's a healthy pullback. I have this yellow line, which was a local high back in December. Once it took that out, it did bounce off of it as support. So I do think, even if it keeps going down, I think that's some pretty healthy support. And it depends on what Bitcoin does. But for those of you who, haven't filled out your positions, for those of you who are maybe just starting your positions, some of these pullbacks could be buying opportunities because in general, the Bitcoin miners have been running. And Iris Energy, when we take a look at the charts, even with this pullback, they're still, I think they're the second best performing Bitcoin miner over the last 2.5 months. I believe Core Scientific and Iris Energy kind of ran out in the last 2.5 months. Those two were off to the races. At one point, they had doubled or tripled in that period of time. And you can see from, just from May 1st, that's 256%. So that's more than a triple in a very short period of time. Cleanspark to 100, thank you very much for the super chat, and thanks for being a member. Cleanspark to 100 said, Cleanspark business side has had a great couple of weeks. Acquisition of 5 Georgia mining sites, 60 megawatt GRDI, which is the grid acquisition, which we'll go through that press release and a couple of things to talk about on that. With energy pipeline of 400 megawatts in Tennessee the next 2 years. 20 exahash announced today. So, yes, they've been talking about that is imminent. So they got to 20 exahash today. Remember, they came into the year at 10 exahash. So that is a double for CleanSpark. And, 20, obviously, that puts them in the top, from a active exahash in the top 3, and they'll compete for second place. I think it's going to be really hard for anybody to beat Marathon on a monthly basis right now. But I think CleanSpark will compete for the second most Bitcoin mined per month. And from an infrastructure standpoint, you're right. It's been all good news for CleanSpark. They've had a wild, huge run up as well, but they have pulled back. So again, it just depends on what your dollar cost average, how full your position is. Under $16, I think a lot of people might feel like that's a bargain. George, what are you thinking about CleanSpark? I know that's one you follow closely, and you have visited 2 of their facilities.
I got in and got back. I got out, and then it didn't do what I thought it would do today, and I got back in. I thought it was going to get destroyed.
Yeah, kind of went side. The Bitcoin miners did okay today. It seemed like this was going to be that Friday, everything gets wrecked, but they fooled us again, as usual. If you guys can do us a favor.
Yeah, it seemed like they was setting up.
Sorry to interrupt, George. I'm just doing my smash the like button. It does help. We're now at 35 likes. We're going for 100. It does help the stream in real time, big time. And the stream needs all the help that it can get because, we turned off all these advertisements. But, they don't, unless you guys smash the like button, they will not put this stream out to the world. So we appreciate it greatly.
I just wonder what they have in store for us in the month of July.
All right, welcome to Talkin Investing. For Bitcoin, for the Bitcoin miners.
For Bitcoin and Bitcoin miners.
Sour Melon Gaming, thank you for member for 16 months. Thank you very much for that. Tom and George, when are you guys thinking we finally take our run towards Bitcoin 100K? Thanks for everything. These 16 months went by quick. Yeah, I know. Time flies. It's crazy. Don't even get me started. You want to take that one first, George? When do you think we're going to get to 100? Bitcoin 100K.
You know what's funny is I was thinking that there was a good opportunity to get there probably by the end of July or August, but I'm revisiting that thought process, Tom, just because, man, there's just too many people that are going to be selling Bitcoin here probably coming up for that to happen.
I know you got a couple of big ones in mind, and I got some articles that we can go through. There's some
Yeah, I mean,
selling pressure on Bitcoin coming up. So you're thinking maybe not this summer.
I'm thinking that we have to wait until sometime. I think, let's put it this way, it's a very fluid situation, Tom. I think that
indeed.
I hope that miners stay strong, but I just think we're in for a little bit of rocky road ice cream here for the next probably 6 to 8 weeks. I don't think they can do it more than 3 months.
I think that's a really good time frame you're talking about. And, sometimes it always seems like we're a month or 2 or 3 away. And then no matter how much time goes by, we're a month or 2 or 3 away. But I don't look at it that way because we have had a monumental run in Bitcoin. Now we're off of our high. We got to almost 74,000. We took out the high from the previous cycle. And this sideways consolidation period, while it is unbelievably frustrating, this happens in every cycle. And we are now 4 months into it. It's a little earlier than usual. In my opinion, we are way ahead of previous cycles. So this could be, this consolidation period, it could be 2 more months. It could be 3 more months. I never expect in the short term, hey, and this is one thing that I will say. I try to watch all the other large Bitcoin mining channels on YouTube and pay attention to what everybody else is saying. And, the predictions are rampant. And I think, a lot of people just for clickbait or maybe just because they're optimistic and, you can take them at their word. That this is, what they think is going to happen. But there's just too many, you got 24 hours left. You buy now. You got 48 hours left. Bitcoin to 100,000 by the end of the day, the week, the month. And the reality is, I think we're just going to have to wait for it. I'll tell you this. I expect Bitcoin. I have said for the last year and a half, I think that, 150,000, 175,000, that's my price target for this bull market. So, sometime in the next 12 to 15 months, and I think it's going to be sooner than later. It could be 9 months. That's where I think we're going to go. But this could drag out for, George just talked about 2 or 3 months. This could easily drag out 2 or 3 months. And then I think the first breakout we should be looking for is when do we break through the previous the all-time high from this March, which was just under 74,000. So my first price target's 80,000. Then when do we run from 80 to 100? I think all of that will happen before the end of the year. And that might seem like a long time away, but we're, this weekend, we're halfway through the year. So, I think we get there in the second half of the year. And, if there's buying opportunities in the middle, then so be it. And I did do some buying over the last couple of weeks and I did it mostly through options. I did buy some BitX, which is the 2x leverage on Bitcoin. So not financial advice. That is super highly volatile. So always be careful with any leverage. But so and I've been doing it on a small scale because obviously, I've told everybody I feel like I filled out my positions a while ago. So I'm looking for small opportunities to make a couple bucks here and there, but mostly just holding my positions, waiting to get where we're going. The real Gary Gensler, market will rally when it's official. It's Biden, in my opinion. So are you saying, can you clarify that at Real Gary Gensler? Just because I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that. I could interpret that a couple of different ways. So if you want to clarify that, here's where I think we're going to get our big move to the upside. And I do think this is coming. And I think that, and today we actually got a piece of the puzzle. So we got some inflation data today. Let me just see if I can find that. So we got PCE today. And everybody, you'll see they say it right in here. The U.S. core PCE index, and then they say the Federal Reserve's preferred gauge to measure underlying inflation. So, you know, we all look at CPI. Retail investors and the world looks at CPI. The Fed continues to stick to their story that, you know, PCE is their preferred gauge, but they obviously look at all of these and take them into account. So this data came out today. Consensus was it was going to be 0.1. It came in at 0.1. That was exactly as expected. So core PCE at 2.6. So this was good. So here, I'll just read it. It's only 2 sentences. The Federal Reserve's preferred gauge to measure underlying inflation edged higher by 0.1 from the previous month of May. It was the softest increase since November of 2023, slowing from 0.3% in the 3 prior months. So this was actually a really good reading. Even though it was right on what they expected, this is a good move in the right direction. Meanwhile, the headline gauge refrained from increasing for the first time this year. On an annual basis, core PCE inflation slowed to 2.6% in May from 2.8% in the previous period. Everybody knows the Fed's target rate is 2.0, but, you know, these are getting pretty close to these numbers. What does all this have to do with, and why is this a part of my answer to when do we hit 100,000? The Fed needs cover to lower rates. And this is exactly what is going to provide them cover. If they can get a couple of more readings like this, and the futures are still pricing in anywhere from 1 to 3 rate cuts this year, and anywhere from September to December. So there's still a lot of uncertainty around this. And I think this is going to be the by far biggest catalyst. As the Fed starts to ease up, and when they finally do this, I think a little bit of the floodgates are going to open. This works into the DXY, which is the strength of the US dollar, which backed off a little bit today, but it's still unreasonably high. So we need to see that trend reverse. We need to see this trend continue. All of that will get the Fed to the point where they can finally give us that first rate cut. And then I think it's on. So that doesn't mean that, you know, the economy is going to be great and the world's going to be great and all those things, but it does mean I do think that's when we get our shift. We can start to chip away at the strength of the dollar and have these risk-on assets, particularly Bitcoin, which moves very much in an inverse, particularly lately, almost directly inverse to the DXY. So my very long answer is I think we got to wait for this rate cut.
You think that's going to help?
I think that's when we get to 100. I think in the meantime, you know, I have a price. I'm looking to get to 74. I'm looking to get to 80. I think those are going to be very important price targets. I think the Bitcoin miners will start to perform or continue to perform well if we can finally bottom out here in, you know, we're clearly in the middle of a pullback. If I go to the 1 day, I mean, we peaked here at the beginning of June, on June 5th. So, and this was, you know, we tested this green line's at around 71,200. So, you know, this is once, twice, 3 times, 4 times. So we've tested that now 4 different times. We failed all 4 times. And, you know, from that point, it's just been down in a straight line. But if you look, I'll go from June 5th. So from June 5th till now, it's been down in a straight line. The other thing I will say is, we're getting a little sideways consolidation. So a little break in this, you know, downward pressure. We'll also go to the ETFs because that's a big part of this picture. But first, I just want to show you, while Bitcoin did this, you can see the DXY did this. So this is how it works. There were a few times that this correlation broke when the ETFs came in and put massive buying pressure. So if there's an external event, every single day isn't going to be a perfect correlation. But in general, you can see as this goes up, Bitcoin goes down. And this has to do with, all has to do with interest rates in the Feds. And I say all, mostly. As other central banks around the world are easing, the U.S. central bank is not. And that is just causing the dollar to remain at, 20 plus year highs versus other currencies. And that is keeping, this risk off mentality. So that's my very long answer to that question. And while I'm here, I do think that this is encouraging. Now, 2 days is by no means a trend. We get everything, things don't move in a straight line. We talk about that all the time. So, but today with that, with the PCE number, you can see even off of a red day yesterday, we still had another red day today, but we're still very high. We're very near, this green line was when we broke out of a 20-year high about 2.5 years ago now. And we've been trading, on either side of this green line for 2.5 years. And, now we're at the higher end of this high range. So this has really been tough on small cap stocks, risk on stocks. Now, if you're in the big stuff, obviously there's some things. Let's just take a look at the market overall. The S&P 500. Sorry. If you look at the S&P 500, I mean, we're 2 weeks into kind of going sideways at an all-time high on the S&P 500. If you look at the Qs, which is the NASDAQ, this was the all-time high, and we kind of candlewicked up back to that today. We might have even taken it out. Let's see. 487.2 versus 486.8. So, we candlewicked to a new all-time high on the Qs today. And this has to do with the mega cap stocks more than anything else. Our little world of small caps, not going great. So for our poll, 36% of the people think we're going to $60,000 and lower. So 36% think the next move is down. 61.5 to 66,000. So that is a big range, and we've been at the low end of that range lately, 33%. So only 14% think the next move is back up above 66,000. And I will say, not that I want everybody to be discouraged, but sometimes it's good news when, some of the optimism gets sucked out of the room, because for as long as that optimism exists, the big money can take advantage of that. So this is a little bit less optimistic than recent polls on our channel, and that might be a good thing. If you can do us a giant favor, if you just joined us, or if you have not yet, if you could please smash the like button. It does help the live stream out in a big way. We took all the ads off the live stream, so they don't pump this out for us unless you guys smash the like button. So we do appreciate your help.
I think we have to turn it back on, Tom.
I guess we do, because,
ever since we've done that?
Yeah, it's been off a cliff since we turned that off. So maybe next week we'll turn it back on if we can get. That's why I hate to hound everybody and be a pest, but that's why I ask people to smash the like button, because if we can get those likes, we don't have to turn that back on. But we used to get 500 or 600 likes, and now we're at 57 right now. So unfortunately, well, maybe people just don't like what we have to say, or they're not too happy with Bitcoin over the last 4 months.
I'm going with the last one.
Yeah, I'm sure that is not helping. This is hard. 4 months sideways. I mean, if I go back to the 1 day, I mean, you can see this has just been up, down, up, down, up, down. This was the low right here. So we haven't even retested this. And the last time we talked, George, you had talked about the fact that, you know, we may very well gravitate back to this line. We never retested this low.
It always seems to hit the line of support, Tom.
And that's...
I don't like it.
Nope, it's not what anybody wants, but it does seem to be what tends to happen. So I would not be surprised by any means to retest this line over the weekend, next week. So next week we have another day off for the equity markets in the United States. So it will be a short trading week. Of course, Bitcoin trades 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, forever, we believe. So on some of those lower volumes, we'll see what happens. I want to go to the ETFs, and then we'll talk about a bunch of news did come out in different Bitcoin miners this week. So we'll get to that.
A lot of news this week.
The what?
A lot of news.
Oh. Yeah, we got a lot of AI, high performance computing type stuff that went on inside of the Bitcoin mining universe this week. So we'll get to all of that as well. So maybe we can do, I see you just closed out the poll. Do you have another one in mind? If not, I got one.
No, I don't. Go ahead.
So are people interested in their Bitcoin miner getting involved in high performance computing / AI? How many of you investors want to see your Bitcoin miner diversify and get involved in that versus staying a pure play on Bitcoin? Because we've seen all the big news this week really had to do with companies diversifying and getting into high performance computing. And some of those companies got some nice bumps on that. CleanSpark to 100 said next week we'll start getting June production reports. So, yeah, that is going to be interesting to see June over May. And I think there's going to be some companies that have good numbers. The global hash rate is retreating. The difficulty level, I'm going to go to that chart because, you know, we're more than halfway through this next adjustment. And you can see if it happened right now, we would have a massive adjustment to the downside. Now, I always am very careful because this can change, right? There's still a lot of blocks left before we do the next adjustment. Roughly every 2 weeks, we do an adjustment to the difficulty level in Bitcoin. And since the halving, you know, these have been adjustments in our favor. In other words, most of them have been red. The difficulty level's going down. The year plus before that, the difficulty level doubled, more than doubled. So, you know, each one of these adjustments was making it more and more and more difficult for the Bitcoin miners to mine Bitcoin. But as we've gone sideways for a couple of months now, and the Bitcoin miners continue to get machines online, and we really haven't gone sideways, we're starting to go down. You know, in an interview, Fred from the CEO of Marathon, in an interview this week, said he still expects a pretty big pullback in the global hash rate. So he's expecting a bunch more decreases in the difficulty level. So we'll see if that plays out. But obviously, for the companies that are accelerating their, you know, CleanSpark just doubled their exahash rate from in the first half of the year, they went from 10 exahash to 20 exahash. So, you know, it's those are the moves, and they're not the only ones. Iris Energy had a huge increase. There have been a lot of Bitcoin miners that really have been aggressively adding exahash. And those were the Bitcoin miners that were getting rewarded, although I will tell you recently, in the last 2 weeks, the Bitcoin miners getting involved in AI or just having announcements in AI, or in one instance really just saying letters AI, in my opinion, have gotten big, big bounces.
Have you ever done a study to figure out what percentage of the exahash is owned by the Bitcoin miners that are publicly traded versus not publicly traded companies?
Yes, I don't have that up, but it is a growing amount. And the thing is, we don't know what other people are going to do. That's a good analysis, George, and maybe we'll start tracking that. And it's not going to be perfect, but there's huge growth plans ahead. So as the network is going sideways and getting a little smaller, the publicly traded companies' exahash rate is growing and growing and growing. And there's plans for it to significantly grow. So, that's going to be a bigger and bigger number. And I know there are people that are worried about concentration among
Amps.
any geographical concentration, any one company, anyone. But the Bitcoin network, in my opinion, is still extremely diversified. So I don't think that's anything to worry about. And there's, we're following now 12 publicly traded companies. I was following 19. There were even several more past that were small and I didn't have on the list. So, there's 20 or 25 publicly traded companies in the Bitcoin mining space. Some of them may be going away in the next, 6 months to 12 months. If you're to believe what a few of the larger CEOs have said, they think there's going to be some consolidation and some of these companies are, just not going to make it post-halving. So we will see. I think the market thinks that as well, as there's 5 or 6 companies that are still down, 50-60% year to date.
Mark said approximately 80% private. Is it that much?
It is.
Wow.
So, that's going to be the key. Because most of the machines that are coming offline are not from the publicly traded companies. And I'll say that a different way, because actually several of the publicly traded companies have swapped out a lot of their machines. But in total, they are growing their exahash. So as the network shrinks and the publicly traded companies grow their exahash, that number, I think it's going to be significantly more than that. It's not going to be half of the hash rate. I would not imagine. But it does depend, on what, because some of these publicly traded companies that have access to funds through dilution and all those things can afford, it depends on what the price of Bitcoin does as well. If Bitcoin struggles, there may be a lot of people that throw in the towel, whereas some of the big Bitcoin mining companies may continue to grow in anticipation that ultimately Bitcoin is going to do what they think it's going to do. Cleanspark to 100 is saying, ask the same AI question when Bitcoin's at 100,000. So I think that's a very valid point, right? As we're 4 months into Bitcoin trading sideways, and we are now kind of towards the bottom of its range in the last 4 months. A lot of this AI stuff is exciting. This is also, I think AI is having its kind of the peak of its little, I'm not going to call it a bubble, but the whatever frenzy there is around AI, it seems like we're pretty close to the peak of it. And I think we'll look back and mark the absolute peak of the AI frenzy as far as just being built into, stocks off to the races when NVIDIA became the largest company in the world, and they are now back to number 3. But 1, 2, and 3, Apple, Microsoft, and NVIDIA, they're still all $3 trillion plus companies, but Apple and Microsoft did pass that NVIDIA back up again. But I think that was the day that, I would ring the bell. That was the peak excitement. But we are seeing it. Let's get into some of these press releases because, so 53% so far. So yeah, do us a favor, vote on this if you can, because that's interesting. 55% of the people that have voted are very interested in their Bitcoin miners getting involved in AI. 25% don't care either way, and 20% are not interested at all. So far, the majority is interested in this. And some of the stock prices are. So I'll just quickly go through some of these press releases that have come out on some moves that some companies have made on the AI front. So the company that got the biggest boost this week, and I think when we look at we'll look at the chart in a few minutes of what all the Bitcoin miners did this week, but I believe BitDigital was the #1 performer on the week, and it was off of this announcement. BitDigital announces finalized terms for contract expansion with major HPC customer. Total contract value now worth approximately $275 million. So this contract doubled. So this was announced on June 25th. Was it Monday or Tuesday? I think that was Tuesday. And on that day, BitDigital was up almost 40% on the day. They've pulled back. They're not up. I think they're up more like 20% on the week. But it was all that one day, and it was all this announcement, which, again, is high-performance computing or AI stuff. So this puts them, it's a $275 million contract, approximately $92 million a year on an annualized basis. So for a company at their size, and I'm going to pull up what their size is. Of the 12 that we follow, there's 2 companies that have much smaller market caps than the other 10. I think 10 of them are over $1 billion. And then you've got BitDigital at $384 million. And just while we're at it, and then we'll get back to BitDigital, but the other one is Hive at $360 million. So you can see those are, a third the size of the next closest company. But with BitDigital, they were down 5% today, so they're off of their highs for the week. But this $92 million is going to be a significant percent of their revenue. So this is a big part of their company. They also have a strong balance sheet. They have a hodl position on Bitcoin, and they have said they intend to grow their exahash rate from, I think they're at 2.8. Their target is 6 by the end of the year, but they don't have purchase orders to get there yet, so we will see. But even with all that said, with only 2.8 exahash, which is much smaller than most of their competitors, they got the big bounce this week, and it was just straight up on this AI press release or high performance computing press release. So that was one. The other company that had a huge week from a stock standpoint was Hut 8. So I think we're going to see when I go to the chart that BitDigital and Hut 8 were the 2 highest performing Bitcoin mining stocks this week, and it had nothing to do with Bitcoin. This isn't even a contract. Hut 8 announces a $150 million strategic investment from Cotu. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that, to partner in building next generation AI infrastructure platform. So essentially, this is debt. This is convertible debt. It's $150 million through a convertible note. I think this is a 3-year note at maybe 8% interest. If I scroll down, it should tell me that somewhere. Okay, so yeah, this is at 8%. So it's a convertible note. They're paying 8% interest on this, but this is a company that's infusing money in, and it's, you can see, with the intention of building next generation AI infrastructure. So this is just straight, this is, here's a Bitcoin mining company. And remember, Hut 8 did not put out their monthly operational report this month. This is the first time in years they have not done that. All the other companies that, the other 12 that we look at and beyond continue to put out their monthly operational report. So I'm not sure what Hut's strategy is on that. So we're not 100% sure, but when last they reported, they had over 9,000 Bitcoin on their balance sheet. So, that was the second largest Bitcoin hodl. It seems highly likely Riot is imminently going to pass them, maybe this month when their monthly operational report comes out. It's likely Riot will move into second place, but still Hut will be very close to the second largest stack of Bitcoin. But they more and more, have turned into an infrastructure play, power play, high performance computing play. And you can see this this is debt, and they got a giant bounce on this. So that was the second AI high performance computing, and then there was a third. Core Scientific announced a new contract with CoreWeave. So CoreWeave is their giant customer. This is what sent Core Scientific to the moon. This is a multi-billion-dollar contract if they exercise, I believe it's a 2-year contract with 2 5-year options. If they run this out the whole 12 years, this is now a $3.5 billion contract, and I think about $1.2 billion of that is this 70 megawatts that they added this week. This came out on Tuesday, that their existing customer that they had, increased the contract by another 70 megawatts, and you'll see it's now approximately 270 megawatts. This is now approximately a $3.5 billion in projected cumulative revenue associated with the previously announced contract with CoreWeave. So that's the two together, and you'll see 12-year timeline. So it's $290 million a year before this contract. So, now it's more than that. Now, Core Scientific did not get a giant bump on this, unlike the other two, but they already had such a massive run-up, whereas the other two were lagging behind. So let's just see if I can find that real quick. So, yeah, from April 16th to June 21st. So that's just under 10 weeks. April 16th seemed to be a bottom. From that day, on this channel, every week we've been tracking how the Bitcoin miners have been doing from that day, which seemed to be a local bottom. So you'll see they're all in the green. They're all up dramatically. This chart is 1 week old. On the weekend, I update all these charts. But as of last Friday, Core Scientific was up 238% in just under 10 weeks. So they did not get the giant pop that the other two companies got on this news. So let's see, BTBT was up 50% and HUT was up 78%. So, and they had a nice run. So if I look at, this should be updated. So you can see, we just went through 3 press releases, and 2 of them, one from HUT 8, one from Bit Digital. HUT 8 was up 21% this week. On a week where Bitcoin, this is one of the worst weeks Bitcoin's had, did not leave its trading range. So, we're just going up and down inside of the same range, but down 7% this week. But I think this is an important thing to look at because the trend continues. Even though some Bitcoin miners were in the red, 4 underperformed, but 8 outperformed Bitcoin this week. And that has been the trend. And some of them, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 that were in the green on a week where Bitcoin was down 7%. So the first 3.5 months of the year up to, April 16th, the Bitcoin miners were doing very poorly. All of them were in the red except for CleanSpark. So in a year where at that point Bitcoin was up 60+%, all the Bitcoin miners were in the red except CleanSpark. So we've seen a huge turnaround from there. This week is no different. While Bitcoin was down 7%, 6 Bitcoin miners in the green, 2 of them up over 20%, and it's these 2 on this high-performance computing stuff. So 56%, George just closed out that poll, 56% of the people are interested in their Bitcoin miner getting involved in this high-performance computing / AI part of the business. And obviously, what they have, and they seem like they're very similar. There's an interview out there with Fred from Marathon where he explains some of the differences. I kind of agree with him. All data centers are not created equal, and a high-performance computing data center is very, very different than a Bitcoin mining data center. It requires less energy, but significantly more infrastructure. So they're different things. They're different expertise. Some of these companies are gaining in expertise. I will tell you, Iris Energy has always touted themselves. In fact, they've said on more than one occasion on their quarterly conference calls, they consider themselves a data center company. They consider that their greatest expertise. So I expect, they'll participate in that. Although they are all in and totally committed on Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining. They had plans to get to 20 exahash. They are now past 10 exahash, and they upped their plans to get from 20 exahash by the end of the year now to 30 exahash by the end of 2024. So that's going to put them in the running, with the likes of Core Scientific and a Cleanspark if they can get there, and even a Marathon. Now, Marathon plans to get to 50 exahash by the end of the year, but we'll see how all these plans go. And I'm remiss in not mentioning Riot, who plans on getting to 30 plus exahash by the end of the year as well. Again,
what do you think Marathon would be price point at 50 exahash? If let's just say Bitcoin's the same.
If Bitcoin sits here, for as long as Bitcoin continues to trade inside this range, you can see the Bitcoin miners creeping up, but I don't think they're going to make that next big move back to their, I'll go to Marathon because to me, I'm looking at this. On February 28th, which was just a few weeks before Bitcoin hit its all-time high, Marathon was trading at $34. So, and in December, when all the Bitcoin miners hit a local high, Marathon was trading at $31. So, I expect Marathon to get to 30 plus. That's a reasonable price target. But again, I do think Bitcoin's going to have to finish its run back at least up to its previous all-time high, and then to 80,000. And then, if Marathon, even if Marathon's between 74 and 80,000, even if Bitcoin's between 74 and 80,000, I do think Marathon will run back up to the top of this range, somewhere above $30. So again, please, this is not financial advice. I'm telling you what I think, and there seems to be a trading range, and there's two, blue lines to me that are the bottom and the top of that range, and obviously sometimes you get a little above the top, and sometimes you get a little below the bottom, but between $16 and $31, so it's almost a double in the middle. Now they're hanging out around 20, and you can see a nice period from May. So over the last month, this has been some serious consolidation with Marathon. And I think they're going to have a good monthly operational report. They had a good monthly operational report last month. So, if they can put some of those together, I think ultimately they'll get back to the top of this trading range. And again, that's step one. But step one is step one might take 1, 2, 3 months. We don't know. And that's not my price target for this bull run. I think Marathon will get a lot higher than that, in my opinion. I expect them to perform. And they are diversifying in a lot of ways. Marathon is a big company. They're a sophisticated company, whether you like them or you don't like them. You may think their market cap is by far the largest out of all the Bitcoin miners, but I think Marathon has a lot of room to the upside. That is my personal opinion. Yeah, Midway is saying Riot's target was 21.4 exahash by the end of June. So I am not optimistic on that at all. What I would like to see is progress. They went from
19.5, 21.4, it's all the same.
They went, right. They were at 12.5 forever. Last month, they went up to like 14.7 maybe. So if they have a nice jump again, with Riot, they've kind of lulled me into, my expectation is that they're going to miss. It's going to take them longer to get where they're going. It took them a lot longer to get to the 12.4 exahash that was their target, but they did ultimately get there. So I feel like they're going to do the same thing here. And 21 is just a checkpoint. That's not the finish line because, like I said, they expect to get to over 30 by the end of the year. They have the infrastructure to do this. So, I'm really expecting, if not June, July, August, I expect those to be good operational reports. So we will see. Time will tell.
I put a poll up. Will Riot get to 21.4 today?
Yeah, because this is right. In the monthly operational report that comes out in all likelihood next week.
I can't believe anybody's going to vote yes.
Wouldn't it be something if they surprised us all?
Oh, we got to. Yeah, he just did that to mess with us. You know you did.
Oh, somebody jumped in and said yes. We'll.
Because once I said that, like, oh, I'm going to screw with George.
That's the way it goes. So there's a lot of these companies that have big. This is what I'm saying. The publicly traded companies, there's 6 or 8 of them that have very big growth plans in the next 12 to 18 months. And then they've talked about what they'll do beyond that, but I'm less confident about, 24 months, 36 months from now. I think it's going to be, those plans will be more dependent on how does this Bitcoin bull market go, right? If there's a fundamental change in what's going on, then you may see some change in some of these. I'm not expecting that, but obviously that's possible. We still see, more than not, we still see just these gigantic price targets for Bitcoin all over the place. And like I said, I mean, if you're watching YouTube, and I kind of just I do to understand what's going on out there and what all of you guys are seeing, and I'm in the same boat, and massive optimism, on YouTube. And so I don't know if that's just to get views or if it's just because people have that high of a level of conviction in Bitcoin. And I have, I'm very optimistic, but I've long since, I'm years out of the short-term guesstimating. And so many of these so many of them state it with such a level of conviction. You got this many days to, or this very specific stuff, and it's like, you don't know. There's a lot of variables. It's like trying to predict the weather. You can see one thing happening and say, well, it's going to be awful, but there's just a monumental amount of variables. So in the short term, anything can happen. As you go longer term, for me, I have a higher and higher level of conviction, because ultimately, my theory in the market, I've said this many times on the channel. I think at some point, assets, stocks, and in this case, Bitcoin isn't a stock, it's a commodity, but at some point, their stock price will intersect with their fair value. There's times where they're wildly overpriced. There's times where they're wildly underpriced, and you can look at it and say, how can this be? But it's just the way it is. So, there's an old school theory. The market is efficient. It's priced everything in. But if you look at what's happened, like maybe that was true 40 years ago or 50 years ago, and that's what they still teach in economics. But in reality, if you take a look at these stocks, you'll see volatility rules the day, and most stocks, have monstrous. I mean, here we're looking at a marathon, super short-term chart, and, it's doubled twice on this daily chart, in the last 6 months. So, at which point was that at fair value? At 34 or at, 14? Because those were a few months apart. So, and Bitcoin wasn't very different in those 2 time frames. In fact, it was going up. So volatility is real in the market, and it's particularly real in the smaller cap stocks, in the risk on high growth stuff, and obviously in the cryptocurrency world, that's compounded. So we are really in, these are the ultimate volatility plays, which is why a lot of people swing trade them or even day trade them. There is money to be made. I mean, if you got this right, there's people that made fortunes going up and down and up and down. I mean, Marathon hasn't left its range, and, if you did this right, you could have made a lot of money. Unfortunately, on the other side, that means there's people that did it wrong and lost a lot of money.
Are you picking on me, Tom?
Hey, listen, I'm way down from where I was, a month ago or 2 months ago. So this is a part of the ride. My investment thesis is, I think, the Bitcoin bull run is, we haven't had the big part of it yet. So I'm buying and holding, but we'll see. So let's talk CleanSpark because there's been some rumors, speculation, and a lot of our members have talked about a pending potential merger or acquisition really by CleanSpark. And so I said a couple of times I really want to wait for positive confirmation, and we did get that. So I want to go through what happened, what it means for CleanSpark, and I also want to show you why I wait on these things. So let's just go, if I can find this. Okay, CleanSpark announces agreement to acquire Grid Infrastructure based on an enterprise value of $155 million. So we'll get more into that. This got a little bit complicated to figure out what was going to be what. And expansion plans of over 400 megawatts in Tennessee. So this is a big infrastructure play. So this is just exactly what they said they were going to do on their conference call. So they said they were looking for infrastructure, not Bitcoin mining companies necessarily. They were looking for the infrastructure side, as they buy all their own machines. They have their own process of building their data centers, but they need the infrastructure. They need access to the power. And so this gets them 400 megawatts, but it's not right away. The first thing is this is an all-stock deal. So an enterprise value of $155 million. It's an all-stock deal, so effectively this will be a part of their at-the-market offering, I suppose. So it's not a huge, when you consider the fact that between the at-the-market offering they opened in January, which was $500 million, they used all of that, and then they immediately opened an $800 million. That's $1.3 billion. So they're using $155 million of it to get access to 400 megawatts. But again, if I can just find the details, you can see, I think 20 megawatts is available immediately. As we look at how the rest of the year is expected to unfold, after closing, we expect to focus. We anticipate this will allow us to exceed 100 megawatts in Tennessee by the end of this calendar year. So 100 megawatts in 2024, 200 megawatts in 2025, and 400 megawatts in 2026. We're starting to see a few of these deals that are coming out that are infrastructure deals, and another one happened today that we'll get to, that are 1 or 2 or 3 years before they get to the finish line. So we're seeing these companies invest in the future. I like this, right? If they're going to do what they said they're going to do, they're going to need all of this and then some. So it seems like they got this at a really good price. Again, this was not a shock. There was massive speculation that this was going to happen, and it seemed to be imminent. And as it turns out, it did happen. So let me get to Robert Anderson real quick, who's been a member for 15 months, who has a chat. I just want to read that. What size do you think creates diminishing returns for miners, if ever? With having to switch our rigs every few years, there could be too big, ? Thanks. So let me get to that, because I want to give a longer answer to that. I want to give a quick answer to that. So let me just finish this conversation up, because that's a very good question, because there's a portion of the infrastructure in these machines that become obsolete. So we'll talk more about that. Thank you for the question, Robert. I just want to finish this piece of the puzzle up. So CleanSpark did not get a gigantic bounce on this. They were up nicely. This came out yesterday, and everything pulled back a little. So, but this was good news. But I want to go through why I wait for these things, because there was a lot of people talking about this on our Tuesday members only live stream, and a lot of people getting excited and looking at Grid. And my concern is always, until you have an announcement like this, you're just speculating, guessing, gambling, whatever you want to say. So I want to go to what happened to Grid, because you can see that from the peak of hysteria here on. So Grid's a very small company. So when, the speculation was that they were going to get bought out, this company skyrocketed. But the problem is, if you got in at the top, this is down almost 70% in the last 3 days. So, yeah, some people probably made a fortune on the way up. But we always talk about, the first people in, they make a lot of money and everybody else loses it. So I can't guess this. So I don't. So, I hope that people didn't end up, congratulations if you ended up on the right side of this, because, on the flip side, if you did this perfectly, this was up 500%. But, that's what I'm saying. Some people win, some people lose. The bottom line is, with a small company like this, it can have these massive moves. But until you know what the deal is, just because they're getting bought out, if you don't know what the final terms of that deal is, you have no idea, whether or not to buy or sell a stock like this. So, it was shocking to me that even up 200%, 300%, people were still piling into this company with absolutely really no idea of what the final deal was going to be. So just a cautionary tale. And a congratulations, for those of you who got this right, I never do this, but congratulations. So that was the big actual Bitcoin mining infrastructure. Actually, there was one more press release that was today. So this is from BitDeer. BitDeer expands power capacity pipeline to 2.5 gigawatts with a 570 megawatt strategic partnership with Monroe County Port Authority in Ohio. So this is another deal. They lead with 2.5 gigawatts, but that's their big picture, and they do a lot of different things. And then specifically, they say this is a 570 megawatt deal. But again, this is another multi-year deal. So I just want to get down to, let's see where they talk about the specifics on this. Okay. The initial 266 megawatts is expected to be, I'm reading this right here. The initial 266 megawatts is expected to be available in Q3 of 2025. That's a year from now. With the remaining 304 megawatts currently under review, so that's still currently under review to be formally incorporated into the regional transmission planning process. So, that could be 2026 or beyond. So that doesn't mean it's not real, because 2025 is going to get here and 2026 is going to get here. And so these companies are already starting to set up the infrastructure. So with that said, that's two companies that have positioned themselves to add, over the course of the next 2 or 3 years to their infrastructure, which gets me back to Robert Anderson's comment, what point do we start to get diminishing returns? The one piece of this puzzle, I don't think we're anywhere near. And the reason for that is there was a time in 2021 where the price of a Bitcoin miner was per terahash was triple or quadruple, at one point even more than that, what it is today. So at that time, and there were none available, people were ordering, giving 50%, 100% deposits to get machines that they hoped would get delivered in 6 months or a year. So that was the bottleneck in this whole Bitcoin mining universe. And there was you paid any price to get your hands on a machine. But we are now living in the exact reverse world. People are paying, plus or minus, they're paying $15-16 a terahash. Again, it was quadruple that at least at the peak. There were people paying in the 80s a terahash back in the day for big orders. So at those prices, you can't, because these do become obsolete every couple of years. Let's say you even get 4 years out of them. By the time you get to the next halving, any machine you're using at this halving, by the time you get to the next halving, those machines are almost certainly obsolete, probably even before then. So you can expect to have to replenish your entire fleet, in call it a 4-year cycle. Now, maybe in the future, that won't be as true as it is today, but it's certainly been true. And, what some of these companies are talking about, in fact, BitDeer themselves is talking about coming out with a machine that's like 3 times as efficient as the best machine on the market right now by the end of next year. So we'll see if they do that or not. But more and more, building out the infrastructure, building out the data centers, and getting long-term data centers and power purchase agreements, I think is the biggest part of the puzzle now in Bitcoin mining. And I think it's just going to be a fact of life that, the CapEx part of the equation is going to be you're going to have to swap out your fleet. But again, these have become more of a commodity than a scarce resource anymore. So I think these companies can continue to grow. There's companies that have talked about getting to 100 exahash. So the key will be, the real answer to the question, Robert, is does Bitcoin keep running? Right? Does Bitcoin get to 100, 150,000 in this cycle? Does Bitcoin ultimately get to 300,000, 500,000, a million? If Bitcoin continues the run that, the Cathie Woods and the Michael Saylors of the world are talking about, even if it does something that even slightly resembles that, I think these companies can continue to scale up. If that doesn't happen, then, that's when they're going to run into a problem. That would be my opinion on that. Any thoughts, George? Is there too big? Is there a point where these companies are getting too big and just having to replace their fleets is too much and it's too big of a risk? There's too many unknowns.
Just be honest with you, never even thought about it. It's never even crossed my mind.
Thoughts never crossed your mind?
No, because everything, because everything's scalable. And if with every 1,000 machines, you need one person, or every 10,000, whatever it is, it's all scalable. It's just people and jobs.
Right. And the nature of this, because the reward gets cut in half every 4 years, by nature, if you're not doubling every 4 years, you're actually becoming a smaller portion of the network. And that's just if the network remains even. Midway One, thank you very much for the super chat. Much appreciated. Also, thank you for being a member. Midway One said, will the Russell 2000 not outperform until after the Fed actually starts cutting rates? Do you think small cap stocks then will do well for 2 to 3 years in a row, like happened in 2016, 2017, and 2019 through 2021? Midway, I think that what you just said is exactly correct. All right. And it has been 3 full years that the Russell 2000 has been pretty dramatically underperforming the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ. So that is that risk on, risk off part of the equation. But here's the thing. I also think the longer it underperforms, the more pressure that's building up. And when the money floods in, and that's what happened, if you remember, November of 2020, December of 2020, January of 2021, you pick a small cap stock, like they were trading for stupidity. These companies were, I'll give you a great example. CleanSpark entered Bitcoin mining in December of 2020. So they had mined like 4 Bitcoin, I think, in the month. And if I'm wrong by 1 or 2, whatever it is. In November, it was 0. They just started mining as a proof of concept in December of 2020. They had they were a different company. They were a microgrid company. They had some power technology. Their sales were almost 0. I think they had $10 million of sales. Their stock ran up to $40 a share. And that was non-Bitcoin related. So, they 20x'd, but that's what was going on. That's when all of the EV the Lordstown Motors of the world that, are gone now. Those stocks went bananas. So, that's what tends to happen. The pain is endless, but then you get these, on the other side, you get this bubble that, be careful. If you can wait for it, catch the bubble and get out in time, you can make a lot of money. But you got, I'll say you've earned it, because we've really, really had to wait for it with the Russell 2000. I just don't believe that from 3 years ago forward, the Russell 2000 is now dead money forever. I think this is a direct correlation to the fact that that's when they started raising interest rates. The more they raised interest rates, the more the Russell lagged the other indexes. And I think that it's going to take that first rate cut for this to really, we may get some motions in the right direction, but I don't think it's going to take off until we have that reversal and, we start to get these rate cuts. And I still do think we're going to get, some significant rate cuts in the next, 12 to 18 months. And it's definitely later than I expected. This is much later than I expected.
When's the next Fed meeting?
Let's go take a look. So,
they off in July?
July 31st. So thanks again, Midway, for the super chat and for being a member. Much appreciated. Great question. And thanks, Robert Anderson. Great question. The next Fed meeting is July 31st. And there's now a 12% chance built in of a rate cut. So I would be super, super surprised if there's a rate cut. The one caveat to that would be is if some new information comes out, and I'm not talking about, a good CPI number. One more good CPI number is not going to move the Fed to say we got to lower rates. So it would have to be something fairly dramatic. However, if you go to the next meeting is none in August. Then we got one in September. You can see now by September, this is the Fed Watch tool. This is the CME. This is the futures trading. So this is what the futures are pricing in. Now you can see a 55% chance of one rate cut and a 7% chance that we'll actually get a second rate cut or, 150 basis point rate cut. So the market is now leaning towards a September rate cut. By November, you can
I think it's too late. I think if they want to do anything to help out the current administration.
You're right. That probably would be too late from a political standpoint, but it just seems like Jerome Powell has held his ground much longer. And what you just said is why I thought he would have caved by now. We would have been getting rate cuts by now. It's the political season in the United States. We're in an election year. And so, I thought we would have already had our first rate cut, but obviously that was not true. That didn't happen. But you'll see by November, there's now a 47% chance. So only a 20% chance that there's not a rate cut by the November meeting. So 80% chance of at least one, if not two, and a tiny little 3% chance of 3 rate cuts or, 75 basis points. By December, that pops up to 18% chance of 3 basis points. So that's still on the table. And believe me, these things can happen fast. They could do that in one meeting. If we start to get some bank failures, if we start, if there's a catalyst, remember how fast they raised rates? Well, this is a part of their toolbox. They can move quickly if they have to. So I don't think they're expecting to have to. The market doesn't think, this is, pretty even money on 1 or 2 or 3 rate cuts by the end of the year, with some immaterial, less than 2% chance that there would be a full 1%, which would be 100 basis points. So that's what the market's pricing in right now. But this can change based on circumstance. You want to talk about your fluid situation, George? This is the ultimate fluid situation, because at one point there was like a 75 or 80% chance that we were going to get a rate cut in March of this year. So obviously that was grossly incorrect. So these futures are not always right. Again, it's very hard. Even big money, it's hard for them to predict the future, which is what they're trying to do when they do stuff like this.
%, say no rate cut on July 31st.
83%. Yeah. So let's just quickly go back and see. Not too different than the futures are saying. The futures are saying 87.6%. We're at 83% in our poll. So good job, everybody. You guys accurately reflect the futures market. Also, thank you, everybody. We just got to 100 likes. So if you have not yet smashed the like button, if you could do us a gigantic favor and smash the like button, we would appreciate it. Helps the stream out, helps the channel out. So that's what's going on with rate cuts. And again, we talk about this because, number one, because we got, I'll go back to, let me go all the way back to the beginning, which is we got PCE data today, which you can see, they always say this, the Federal Reserve's preferred gauge to measure underlying inflation. So, allegedly, this is the number one thing the Fed looks at, but you can rest assured they look at all of this data. CPI data is by far more popular than this, and it's much bigger fanfare. The CPI release is a big deal. This kind of happens quietly and doesn't necessarily have big moves on the market, but the Fed's paying attention. And for those of you who weren't here for this part of the stream, these numbers came in. These are the best numbers we've really had all year for PCE, so that bodes well for potential increases the likelihood that we get these rate cuts that are starting to be priced in. So this is what we want to see. This is good for Bitcoin, in theory. Oh, just a random aside note. You never see this. There was a company today that's one of the tried and true blue chip companies that just got wrecked today. So I just want to show you guys this. Nike was down 20% today.
Yay.
This is, this is truly if there's any such thing anymore as a blue chip company, this is a very reliable, tried and true company, and this is pretty much a 5-year low. The only time it got below this was, March of 2020. So obviously, we all remember, I'm not allowed to say it on YouTube, but we all remember what happened in March of 2020. So every asset in the world crashed, on or around this date. Other than that, this is a 5-year low for Nike. So this was a bad day for Nike. They had bad forecast going forward for sales, and this stock got clobbered on this news. So just thought it was noteworthy. You don't see, like we're used to. You look at Bitcoin miners. We had a Bitcoin miner move 40% this week. We just looked at Grid, which got bought out by CleanSpark, that was up 500%. But when you're looking at a Nike, this is over $100 billion market cap company. You do not get 20% moves in $100 billion market cap companies, on a regular basis. This is a rare event. So I hope nobody was in Nike because it had a bad day. So just to quickly go through, we won't belabor this because I know people are sick of talking about it, but we would be remiss not to at least mention the Riot Bitfarms saga continued this week. So just quickly, we talked about this a lot on our members only stream, but I'll at least hit the highlights. Riot requisitions a special meeting of Bitfarms, and some more news came out on this today. So they want a special meeting. They actually nominate or recommended these 3 individuals to be added to the board of directors for Bitfarms. So that's one big piece of news. The 2 other big pieces of news came out in this. Riot currently owns 14.9% of Bitfarms. So Bitfarms has a poison pill that they built in at 15%. So Riot went right up to the line but did not cross it. They're at 14.9%, and they withdrew their offer. So this all started with an offer to buy Bitfarms for $2.30 a share. So, given the fact that Bitfarms is now trading for significantly more than that, it was evident that offer was no good, but they have now formally withdrawn that offer. However, they say they stand ready to engage with a reconstituted Bitfarms board regarding a potential transaction. So reconstituted board would be adding the 3 board members that they talked about. But Bitfarms did not do that. They added a board member, I think, today, and it was not one of those 3 people. Bitfarms' response to this was basically to just summarily reject everything that they said and to say that Riot's not really... Both of these companies are at a point where they're saying the other one's not acting in good faith, and, you know, let's try and make a deal. We'd be willing to make a fair deal. So that's where all this sits.
The word. Fair? The word of the day. Fair.
Right, and what's a fair deal?
I know.
So this is I don't think this is ever going to happen. I think these 2 companies have very different ideas. The one thing is, you know, if Bitfarms fails to perform, because they put out some pretty specific benchmarks for what they expect to do this year. They expect to get to 12 exahash by June 30th. So, you know, we're going to see in the next monthly operational report next week. They will put their monthly operational report out Monday, unless they break a 3-year trend of the first business day of the month. They put their report out first thing in the morning. So we're likely to get, that's Bitfarms I'm talking about, we're likely to get their info on Monday. So if they're doing what they said they're going to do, they expect to get to 21 exahash by the end of the year. I just don't see these 2 ever coming to terms. So I don't think this acquisition is ever going to occur. That's my personal opinion. Maybe after this poll, you can just see where everybody thinks, is this ever going to happen? Are they going to agree on a number? Or are they just going to argue?
You want to talk about 2 different management styles.
Yeah, well, one of their management styles is to not have a CEO.
Which is crazy.
And I'm not bashing Bitfarms. That's one of my original positions from back in the day. You know, I had to buy it over the counter before it had moved over to the NASDAQ because I'm in the U.S. You know, if you're in Canada, it was trading, you know, for years before that. And I like that company, and I think they have big things ahead. I like both of these companies, so I just don't think they're ever going to get together, and I don't think they should, in my opinion. I don't think there's a deal that makes sense for either one of them. What Bitfarms would have to get to be paid fairly, I don't think Riot can afford. That's my personal opinion, so I think, in my mind, there's no deal to be made here. Both of these companies need to focus on what they're doing, execute their own plans, and they'll both be great. If they fail to do so, then obviously, you know, they won't be.
Monday? Oh yeah, it's Independence Day in Canada on Monday, or what do they call it?
Okay, so there's a holiday in Canada one day next week. There's a holiday in the U.S. one day next week. So we have an interrupted trading week next week here in North America. Sorry, I think you broke up there for a second, George.
It's the national anthem of Canada.
Oh, Canada. No?
Yeah, oh Canada, oh Canada. Forget. Did you know they didn't have an army?
What do you mean they don't have an army? They have an air force?
They like, you know, it's so small. It's not worth even talking about.
Well, I mean, Canada's population is a very, very small. Canada's, geographically speaking, a very large country, but their population is small. For anybody who cares. I think we looked this up one time. I feel like there's 50 million people maybe that live in Canada.
We did remember. going to look at.
Sorry, George. I don't know why you're breaking your audio is breaking up a little bit. You're breaking up.
Do.
Just going through my list to see what else we had going on here. Oh, let me get to just a couple of things that everybody knows about. But this, we asked earlier, when's Bitcoin going to get to 80,000 or 100,000? And George had talked about some, a couple of things that were some potential downward pressure on Bitcoin. So I'm just going to quickly go through, we all know about these, but let's just. Number one.
4,000 members is how many Canadian armed forces there are.
Oh, well, there you go. Somebody's always got the info. Thank you, Andrew, for bringing us up to speed on that. I knew someone who flew in the Air Force in Canada. German government moves 24 million Bitcoin to Kraken. This was in the middle of the week this week. Tuesday's movement comes days after the entity shifted 425 million among wallets. So if you look piece by piece, the German Federal Crime Police Office transferred 24 million into Bitcoin across 2 transactions on Kraken and Coinbase. Another 30 million of Bitcoin was moved to a new wallet. Previous transfers totaling 195 million in Bitcoin sent to exchanges on June 19th and June 20th. So piece by piece, if you get to the bottom of this, I think they have about $2 billion in Bitcoin. Or 50,000 Bitcoin. Now it's probably, that's what they seized. They have been selling this off piece by piece. So it seems like they intend to just continue to sell this. It doesn't look like they're dumping it. Right, they're doing this a little bit at a time, but this is just a constant, steady flow of sell pressure on Bitcoin. So this sits out there, and then obviously the bigger one, Mt. Gox. So you can see Mt. Gox has 140,000 Bitcoin. For those of you who don't know, they announced that in the middle of July, they're going to start returning some of these Bitcoin to their owners. And they're committed to a schedule where I believe by October 31st, all 140,000 of these Bitcoin will be returned to their owners. So that doesn't mean sold, but, the speculation is how many of these people, once they get their Bitcoin, are going to sell them. And I will tell you, this particular article, this is one person's opinion, Mt. Gox redemption fears are overblown, says traders. So this person puts a scenario together where they feel a lot of the people, and this is true, a lot of the people involved in this litigation have had a chance to be bought out over the years. So if they really wanted their money for the last 10 years, they've had opportunities all the way along the way to cash out if they wanted to. So, that under that theory, maybe less of this is going to hit the market that we think. But I do think it's fair to assume with 140,000 Bitcoin going back to people, and Bitcoin was trading at $700 when this Mt. Gox situation, when it got locked up and people couldn't get their Bitcoin back. So there's a massive amount of gains locked up in here. So those are two things that will be potential sell pressure over the next 2, 3, 4 months on Bitcoin. Conversely, let me see if I can find this. Here is what the ETFs have been doing. So we talked last week, actually I think on the members only live stream. If you look at all this red, this was I think 9 out of 10 days that, and you can see at the top each one of these are the US ETFs. You can see each one at the top. And this was yesterday, $12 million of inflow. So we now have 3 days in a row a very, very small inflows, but at least that ends a 9 out of 10 day streak where there were pretty significant outflows for 9 out of these 10 days from the ETFs. That corresponds with this window of time that Bitcoin has continued to have a pullback. These 3 days of small inflows corresponds with the 3 days in a row that Bitcoin, if we look at the 1 day chart, all of a sudden we have 3 days in a row where Bitcoin moved sideways. That was this 1, 2, 3. We don't know what today's flows are. So there's a really strong correlation, right? During those 8 out of 9 days was this big move to the downside here. Then the 3 days of almost sideways but green inflows was these 3 days right here. So this is another thing. So you've got a lot of things that are driving what's going on with Bitcoin. So we're trying to keep our eye on all these different moving parts. So the question will be, if is there a floor here somewhere where, even if Mt. Gox starts to, give the coins back and people start to liquidate, is there a floor? Is there a number where there's a big buy wall, right? And we're going to find some support to eat up all of those Bitcoin that come onto the market, that add to the short-term supply. And we're going to find out what the answer to that is. I'd like to think this is a nice line. We have a line here at 56,500. That was the low of the last 4 months. We have not retested that low. So I never look at numbers lower than that until we go retest this and see if it passes or fails. So that's big picture. Anything else, George? Any other thoughts?
No, I don't. I'm pretty getting ready for the holiday. Got to buy some fireworks, blow up some stuff.
Well, I know that in the United States, I think next week is probably not going to be the most productive week of the year with a holiday right in the middle of the week.
The week they get you.
And, it's the middle of the summer. It's a holiday in the middle of the week. So, and that usually can be a lull for the stock market as well. But no guarantees. We'll see what happens.
I think time to go to the Hamptons, right, Tom?
That's right. A lot of people will be hitting the Hamptons this weekend. All right. Well, that's what's going on. So, just my final thought would be, if you look at the Bitcoin miners, they were pretty sideways today. And then I'll just go back to this chart. So if you look at what happened this week, and I'll update all the weekly, monthly, year-to-date type stuff over the weekend, but just at a quick glance, Bitcoin was down 7% this week, and 8 of the 12 Bitcoin miners we follow outperformed Bitcoin. 6 of them were in the green. 2 of them were up over 20%. So, we're about 2.5 months into the Bitcoin miners outperforming Bitcoin. This is all playing catch up because they're still not back. Many of them are still not back to even caught up with Bitcoin year to date. So I expect the trend to continue. I expect them to chase Bitcoin, catch up, pass Bitcoin, and do what we think they're going to do as time goes by. That's my personal opinion, as always, not financial advice, but I'm encouraged with the price action this week. Unfortunately, the 2 worst performers were Bitfarms and Iris Energy. Those, I do hold positions in those. So, it was a tough week for those, but you win some, you lose some. In general, I feel we're trending in the right direction. All right, so that's everything I got. George, have a fantastic weekend. Everybody, special thanks to all of our members. Special thanks to everybody that smashed the like button, and, of course, to the Super Chats. So thank you guys. Everybody have a great long, not long weekend. Have a great weekend. If you have plans next week, be safe, travel safe, enjoy the holiday. George?
Nothing. Don't blow up your hand.
Yeah, be careful. Everybody be careful out there. All right, have a fantastic weekend, everybody. Thank you so much for joining.